Welcome, everyone. This is Brian Walsh here with SoFi. Thanks for joining another one of our weekly sessions on both Twitter and LinkedIn. For those of you who have not attended before, my name is Brian Walsh. I lead our financial planning team here at SoFi. And today I'm really excited. We're going to talk about some interesting topics, and especially excited for the guests that we have today. Before we hop into that, just some quick disclosures to get them out of the way. Anything that we talk about today, not considered financial advice, even though, I am a certified financial planner at SoFi, more education, guidance, tips, things along those lines. So if you want to get into your personal circumstances and get some advice, you could talk to one of our financial planners, but we're really not going to dive into that today. So really for today's session, I guess over the last, couple months, even beyond that, it's one-on-one sessions or even, throughout these live stream sessions that we've had, we get a ton of questions with people who are just interested in learning more about financial literacy. How do I improve it? How do I go about, increase my investing knowledge, stuff like that. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, but we also want to touch on, putting that financial knowledge into action. Because it's one thing to learn about something, it's another thing to, have the willingness or the ability or the confidence to actually put that into action and make some meaningful change. And that's really financial capability. So I've watched a bunch of Ross Mack's videos. He did a great job, really actionable, simple, straightforward insight into personal finances. So I'd like to welcome, Ross Mack to the live stream. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Brian, thanks so much for having me, man. How's it going?
You know what? It's going good. And since you're a fellow Chicagoan, the Cubs being 9-2 so far this year, it's going a whole lot better.
There we go. Yeah, I'm a huge Cubs fan. Thanks. I just want to really say thanks for having me, man. So to tell you a little bit about myself, once again, thanks for the platform. But my name is Ross Mack. I am an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a financial educator, as well as a musician. And one thing that I really pride myself is just trying to find a way to really bridge the information gap throughout society. I think that for me, one of the things that I really love doing is being a champion for financial literacy. And I try to do it in a way that makes access to this information a little more easy to actually digest. And so because of that, I built my own platform called Maconomics, where it is literally built to give everyday people kind of plain advice when it comes to financial literacy and make it seem a little more simpler than at times it could appear to be.
Awesome. So, I have a handful of questions that we kind of talked about ahead of time, but for those of you tuning in or watching, please feel free to drop your questions in the comments. I'll mix in some questions on and off throughout. I'll remind people later on, but we'll just get started kind of with some questions that we talked about before. I think financial literacy, you and I being in the industry, it's a really kind of popular phrase or a catchphrase, and it gets tossed around a lot. But from a practical perspective, what do you think are some key ways that people can improve their financial knowledge?
Yeah, I think first is like to look at it and understand it isn't that complex. It isn't rocket science, right? I think you have to literally look and say, how can I now take advantage of all the information? Because back in the day when our parents were growing up, they didn't have so much access at their fingertips. Right now you have Google University, you have, the College of YouTube, Arts and Sciences, right? And so as a result, what it boils down to is you actually having that willingness and that mindfulness to actually go out and pursue it, start understanding, what actually do you need to start Googling, right? How do you get more in tune with your own financial health, right? Is it, how to budget better, start looking at understanding, what exactly are my inflows and outflows, right? From there, understand, okay, let me spend less than I'm actually making, right? And from there, now you're starting to that's really how financial literacy starts to actually come to fruition, is like actually write it down and say, okay, where are my inflows, where are my outflows? Okay, now let me figure out how much debt I have. How am I able to now start paying that down? Now once you get in control of that, now you're able to say, how do I make my money grow? How do I make money in my sleep? How do I start investing? How do I start taking advantage of, so many other amazing products that are at everyone's fingertips?
That's awesome. And I think it is that, you talked about kind of that first step of assessing where you're at. So when you see people, starting to learn and begin their financial journey on improving their knowledge, do you think they start with what they're interested in, maybe what they need, maybe a combination of the both of either one? How should they get started as they're, going to Google University or leveraging the SoFi app or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think first it's like, why am I trying to get smarter on this, right? Is it because I have a child? Is it because I'm trying to find a way to build generational wealth? Or is it, hey, man, I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck, right? It's a vast majority. The majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, right? And so you have to ask yourself, why am I trying to get better financially, right? Is it because, like I say, you're now trying to invest? Are you trying to, grow your money? Are you trying to do better for yourself and your family? I think once you start having dependents and things of that sort, that conversation has, the conversation becomes a lot more important to you. And then it's like, okay, now that I know why I'm doing it, let me start looking at things that are close to me. And now let me figure out how to try to take everything to the next level.
Awesome. I love that. I love the idea of starting with the why. Maybe it's because I've been away from my kids for 4 days and I miss my kids, but going back to the why with the kids and everything, I think, that transitions well into kind of the next question that we're talking about, where it's like, hey, knowledge for sure is important. But I'd love to get your thoughts on, how that compares to the other side of the coin of having, the confidence, the willingness, and even the opportunity to take that knowledge and actually turn it into action.
Yeah, I mean, so the way I look at it is like, financial literacy is a language, right? And I think the earlier you start learning how to speak financial literacy in the realm of it being a language, the more fluent you will be in it, right? But it's also saying, like, if I learn Spanish at an early age and I no longer use it over the remaining of my life, I'll probably lose that skill. And I think that's what the capability of it is, right? It's one thing to be financial literate, and then it's like actually putting that into practice. And I think, for a lot of people might have trouble doing it, is saying, let's actually step back and let me actually, probably try to leverage the SoFis of the world and understand that there are professionals there that can actually help me and leverage and actually figure out how to take my, my goals to the next level. But I think what it boils down to is like, first, become financial literate, right? Figure out what your goals are. Now it's the next step of actually connecting the dots and trying to figure out how to get to that next level. Am I trying to save for that car? Am I trying to save for, my child's college fund? Or, am I just trying to start, stop living paycheck to paycheck? And I think once you understand the why, now it's like the how. How do I get there? Is it, having multiple savings accounts? Or is it, now, having some type of automated, allowing automation to be a big part of your life, right? Is it, automatically investing in my retirement account or automatically investing into some type of investment account? But I think it goes from the why and then next to the how. And I think the how is, the interesting part.
Yeah, definitely. And it, I think, I don't know, everyone who's tuned in to me before know I'm a financial planning nerd. And, so I read a lot of the random research, and there's something called the Decay Effect. And it basically says, like, if you don't use it, you lose it. So the idea that you were saying where you put it into practice, and that's even, going back to when you're learning about personal finances, it's like, hey, if something's relevant to me, let's read up on it, let's apply it. And then going back to the Spanish example, that's awesome insight. So I think, breaking this down a little bit, talking about like, hey, the confidence, the willingness, the opportunity, we work with some people who maybe they know what to do, but they struggle with the confidence. I'm like, okay, is it really the right thing? Or they're second guessing themselves. And then it kind of leads to kind of inertia where they don't take action. So, what are some, tips or insights you have for people that I guess would struggle with the confidence side of things to taking financial action?
I think the actual confidence side is, I think what you have to first understand is like, look, we're not talking about, rocket science right now. What we're talking about is something that's truly impacting your life. And I think one of the biggest things is understanding that hindsight is 2020, right? One thing that I've been doing for Maconomics, and I've been preaching this for over a year, is like, look, guys, there's so many things that are unexpected. So one of the first things you need to do when you start thinking about, your financial goals is, look, let's budget, understand your inflows and outflows. And then in the event that something random happens, you need to have that emergency fund, right? And so it's like, okay, let's have 3 to 6 months of necessary expenses just saved away in the event something happens, whether it's, some car accident, or call it, coronavirus, right? And so once you understand that, then it's like, wow, now I knew this, but now it's like, this is now something that, I needed to be capable about applying, because everyone knew like you needed to have a rainy day fund, but it doesn't come to fruition until it actually comes, right? Life can come at you fast. And so when it comes to that, it's like, listen, hindsight's so 2020 that you understand, like, what, let me now get in control of my finances. Let me now start putting everything that I know into practice. And I'm having these conversations with a lot of friends and, on the internet, and it's the great type of conversations, because it's like, I can tell some of my childhood friends, like, look, man, you should be investing right now, and it's like, oh my God, like I'm seeing other people that these people would look at them like, I know I'm smarter than that person. How did he just make all that money investing in XYZ stock, right? And it's like, you know what? It's time to actually get confident. And I think the best way to get confident is first, having the plan, right? Making those goals, knowing the why, and then actually setting it up, because, a lot of people might be a little nervous to start investing, but I think you'll be less nervous to start investing if you have some type of financial health, if you're not living paycheck to paycheck, if you understand what your inflows and outflows are, and now you're able to say, you know what, I have an extra $200, $300, $400 of disposable income that I can now put towards investing. And I think that is how you start getting more confident, because it's like, let me continue to start doing all the research, right? But now let me actually put it to practice. And how do you get more comfortable and confident about putting it to practice? It's like just being ready to take that next step. And I think you just got to start taking advantage of a lot of the things that are here, right? There's so many technological advances that allow people to effectively kind of bridge that information gap.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for sure, stressing the importance and, the impact of an emergency fund. And I think, as you're talking, it went back to, there's a member I was talking to a while back, and, they had their emergency fund, they had their bad debt paid off. And I mean, really the next best use of their dollar was investing. And they just, kind of had that inertia setting in. And one thing that they did is they started following ETFs and things like that on the watch list in the SoFi app. So that way they would see it day in and day out. They would get the exposure. They would read the articles about it. And that made them a little bit more comfortable. So it's kind of, to your point, taking those smaller actions and let those tiny actions kind of build on top of each other towards that bigger picture. Because, like, let's face it, we're not planning for the next 40 years right now, because we don't even know what's going to happen in the next, 1 to 5 years, let alone planning out the next 40 years to a science.
Yeah, I think you just touched on a good point. It's like, to that person that first had the plan, I think if everyone was to look at it and put it in bite sizes, it gets a lot easier. Right. I think for the person that, is probably trying to keep up with the Joneses and looking at their most famous, whether entertainer or athlete or, movie star, it's like, you're not able to live that life yet. Right. You're not going to buy a stock tomorrow and get rich the next day. Right. It's all about taking those baby steps. So understanding, OK, the first step, let me have that first, $1,000 saved. Next step, let me write that budgeting plan down or whatever. But it's like taking those baby steps. To your point, now the person has their fully funded emergency fund. Now they're able to start thinking about and now they're trying to process different types of investments, right? Looking at, like you say, the SoFi watch list, and now they're seeing those different ETFs. And I think it's like, once you start taking baby steps, it's so much easier to actually take it all in, rather than feeling like you're drinking from a water hose. You can now like take sips and you can actually get to the next step.
Definitely. Cool. So next question, and for those of you who are watching and just tuned in, yeah, I'm tossing out some questions to Ross Mack so we can talk through some key things that we see going on. But if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in there, and then we'll get to your questions towards the end and kind of sprinkle in the mix and everything. I think one thing that this kind of leads me to think about, and everything we're talking about is awesome, but at the same time, there's some people who, maybe struggle with the opportunity to take action. Maybe it's due to the pandemic. Maybe it's due to having just a crap ton of student loan debt. Maybe it's due to all these other things. What are some, insights that you have for people who may struggle with having an opportunity to take action and put things into place?
Yeah, and I think it's such a great question. I think, when it comes to opportunity, I think we all understand that there are going to be people that are a little more privileged than others, right? There's a huge wealth gap, huge wealth disparity, in America. And so one thing you have to understand is that, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And so when you understand that, and that's what made me say, like, you're able to start taking smaller steps to actually get to your long-term goal. And I think to a person that doesn't necessarily have the opportunity, whether it's access to different resources, it's first, let me write out a plan, right? And now figure out what are the most logical steps to get there. Because if you're starting out, you didn't, your parents didn't have a college fund, and now you are walking into mounds of debt due to going to college. It's like, okay, how do I get to financial health, right? It might be, let me refi, let me get a lower interest rate, obviously the SoFi way. And then it's like, how do I now take this to the next step? It's like, okay, now I finally paid that debt down. Now I can start thinking about getting to that next step. And I think that a lot of people that don't come from, those type of backgrounds or don't come from generational wealth, it's more interesting for them because it's like, now I'm in a position to develop and build that generational wealth, right? And so for that person that who's actually struggling with opportunity, it's like, okay, what are the means that I'm able to now utilize to bridge that information gap, right? To bridge that wealth gap, to bridge that opportunity gap. Because, there's some people that might live in certain areas that aren't able to walk into a particular bank and get, may not be able to get a loan, right? For various other reasons, right? However, now they can take advantage of, the SoFis of the world, right? They're able to take advantage of, allowing the internet, allowing, digitization as a whole, technological advances to now utilize kind of the fintech world. And I think from there, understanding your goals, now understanding what are the assets that are going to put you in place to actually getting to that next step.
Yeah, that's awesome insight. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I work for SoFi. I work here for a reason. I was actually a member before I started working here. I love it. But in general, I think, technology has really democratized, access to whether it be knowledge, with articles online or YouTube videos or like the videos that you put out there. People wouldn't have had access to that 5, 10, 20 years ago. Or be able to track your spending or be able to access, loans and things like that. So I do think that's important, but it's, certainly, areas we can improve on as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it is one of the single-handed best factors that have led to a more general equality overall, right? It's like so many different factors, but the internet has been able to effectively level the playing field, right? There might be certain school districts that provide better education than other, underprivileged, communities. However, the internet has kind of put everyone at the same, level. It's just a function of, are you now utilizing those resources?
Yeah, and one thing to throw out there, not that this is a commercial for the planning team that I lead, but at the end of the day, it was important to me when I came here, we treat financial planning as a member benefit. Because I think a lot of other firms are like, hey, you have to have $250,000 or $500,000 or whatever to have access to human expertise if you need it. And we just treat it as a member benefit, same with career coaching. And I think the more and more people do stuff like that will open up, to your point, providing the knowledge, the opportunity, and things like that for people to keep on kind of progressing and help them make financial decisions before they get to that $250,000 or whatever it may be, because people need the help before that.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Cool. So I think, we talked about, the opportunity, we talked about confidence. I'd love to get your insight on it because, I mean, you're deep into the personal finance world on this. What do you think is the biggest misconception that you come across related to personal finances and, how people go down that journey?
That's a great question, right? I think, and that's one of the biggest reasons that I even started doing Maconomics was to make it more simple, right? To make it more accessible, easier to digest, because there are so many misconceptions. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you have to be rich to start investing, or you have to be a rocket science to not be in debt, right? Or you have to come from a rich family not to be financially capable, right? And I think that the moment people understand that that isn't the case, the moment people understand you don't need to have $1 million to start investing, you don't need to even have, $100, right? Like obviously you guys offer stock bits. You can buy fractional shares. There's so many other platforms that allow people like, oh, I want to buy some Google, but I can't afford it. Yeah, okay. Well, you can now buy fractional shares of it, right? And so it's so many things. Or to a person who's like, man, I want to buy real estate. Okay, well, I don't know. I don't have good credit. Well, you know what? You could actually buy a REIT, right? And I think what it boils down to is just information. And I think that's one of the biggest things one of my biggest missions is trying to bridge that information gap, because you don't have to be the smartest person, the richest person, or come from the best, background to now be a little more astute when it comes to your own personal finances. There's so many things that you're able to take advantage of. It's just a function of you putting everything into practice. And like you say, from financial literate to actually capable. And it's all boiling down to understanding, look, you don't have to be this way to get to this point. It's just you have to plan, you have to make goals, and now you have to actually take actionable steps towards each way you're trying to go.
Definitely. That makes sense. And I think, one of the things that I see, and for some reason, maybe it's because there's like personal financial gurus out there talking about like, oh, you got to pass up on this $5 latte from Starbucks or anything. One of the misconceptions I see is like people focusing on the small stuff and getting lost in the small stuff and ignoring the big stuff. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's one of the things where I think if you look at anyone's spending or their lifestyle, what blows up people's budgets and kind of pushes back their goals is going to be their transportation, their housing expenses. Like if you're driving a car that you can't afford or living in a house that you can't afford, or even maybe you can, but it just reduces your savings, I think that ends up being, probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I see, talking to members and doing stuff like this.
Yeah, there are a lot of, kind of YouTube gurus who are like, oh, save that $2 every day. Don't grab that latte. And to your point, yeah, it's like people need to write it down, understand what your inflows and your outflows are, and understand if your paycheck, if you're not able to actually pay your rent with at least one of your paychecks, you probably shouldn't be living at that place. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to how to be better financially sound.
Awesome. So we'll transition to sprinkling some audience questions in here. As we're talking about, financial capability and, becoming more capable, great question. How can I help my family and friends become more financially capable?
How can I help my what type of friend? I'm sorry?
Family and friends.
Oh, how can I help my family and friends? Well, shameless plug. I would tell them to, I would for sure tell them to subscribe to, Ross Maconomics channel on YouTube. But in all honesty, it's one, figuring out what their plan is, right? And figuring out what their problem is. I think everyone needs to understand what the why, right? My wife and I are having a child. I understand what my why is, right? I understand, I don't necessarily need the new luxury car. I don't need the new luxury clothing anymore because now I have someone else I'm thinking about, right? Now I want to think about, different ways that I'm setting up stuff for her, whether it's, different college funds, different 529 plans, different, now I want to look at how my retirement is looking at. What's my 401k as well as an IRA looking like, right? And now I'm looking at, different custodial accounts that I'm working on getting for her. And I think what it boils down to is doing the research and understanding what the why is and writing it down, taking control of what your inflows and outflows. Because at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest misconceptions. You understand that a lot of people are like on a hamster wheel, right? And they're paying the same amount of minimum credit card balance each month. And what they understand is that they end up paying, more in interest than they actually do what the actual principal balance was, right? And so when you start understanding that there's so many things that are keeping you away from your goals, you just have to look at what they are and now attack it, write it down, understand, what is causing you so much grief. Is it because you are saving poorly, or is it because you actually don't have any savings, right? Or is it, if you know yourself, is it, hey, every time I get a paycheck, I go do X, Y, Z. Well, maybe you need to try to do some type of automation where not only does your paycheck go, not only does a little bit of your paycheck go to your 401k, but now a little bit of your paycheck goes into a different account that you really don't even look at. You don't even access. It might be your emergency account, or another automation where it might be directly investing in some passive account that's investing it for you, right? But I think to a person that's trying to get their family and friends more, financially literate is 100% tune into all Maconomics content. But just do the research because it's there, right? I think now we no longer can complain because everyone is able to access Google University and the College of YouTube Arts and Sciences, right? It's right there. Everyone can use it.
Definitely. And I also I love the question on really working with your friends and family too, because I think that's an important aspect of this whole thing is who you surround yourself with. I mean, I heard that growing up. My mom would tell me, you become who you surround yourself with. So as you're having these conversations and you're around people that are ambitious and work towards goals, that on its own, I think is super cool. All right, next.
100%. Even to that point, right? To your family and friends, the way that my friends and I talk right now is completely different than 10, 20 years ago when we were either talking about sports all the time or different girls or something like that. We're talking about different stock investments or different things they're doing. I open up an LLC for XYZ reason. Oh, why? We're having meaningful conversations that makes me so excited to be surrounding myself with these levels of friends now.
Definitely. We got another question. What book or resource would you recommend to break down the difference or, set a path of financial literacy and capability?
I might deter to you. For me, when it comes to that, it's another shameless plug, but I put out weekly content where it is based on, not only being financially literate, but figuring out what are the necessary steps to get there, right? Whether it's hey, I understand that one of the greatest forms of generational wealth is life insurance. Okay, how do I get there? It's now you get to that, or understand that, the average student graduates with $30,000 in debt. What way is to get around it? Maybe set up some type of college plan, college fund 529, a Coverdale for your child, right? It's all about, understanding what a lot of issues a lot of people have, whether it's, a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. How do you get around that? Okay, let's first start looking at the budgeting. What are your after-tax inflows, right? Are you spending 50% of that on your necessities? Then 30% of that going towards the things you might want to do? Then you can put the other 20% towards savings and pay down debt. But for me, it's it's all about, the research. It's all about allowing, everything that's around you, whether it's all the different resources, because it's a lot of resources. I don't know. Do you have any particular books you read on this?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I'm on vacation these couple of weeks, but normally I'm in front of a big bookshelf, so I get random book questions. I think I'm a big fan of two different books. Number one, Naked Economics is just a layman's approach to just basic economic concepts that I think are really important in personal finance. Another one would be The Behavior Gap. I think Carl Richards is the author. Really kind of the behavior side and how you get in the way. And then, I'm a nerd, so I listen to all sorts of random podcasts and everything. But I think, to me, it's I feel like the nuts and bolts of personal finance, to your point, they're not the most important thing. It's how do you, influence those actions and those habits. So, yeah. Oh, we got another good question that I'm assuming it's specifically for you because I am the least creative or musical person in the world. Sometimes I feel like there's an assumption that someone's either creative or good with money, but not both. As someone who is also a musician, can you please talk to areas where your creativity has come in handy when it comes to your personal finances?
Wow, that is a great question. How's my creativity helped when it came to my personal finances? Well, I think one good way, right, is to understand. So, to people just tuning in, my name is Ross Mack. I am an artist. I got a new song on the NBA 2K21 soundtrack. It's amazing, a dub. But to that person, how do you use creativity to help you with your personal finances? It's understanding how to budget better, right? And what I mean by that is you don't necessarily need to go out and spend $200 at that fancy restaurant with you and your date. You might be able to be a little more creative and spend a fraction of that, but even have a better evening, right? If it's a date or if it's, just chilling with your friends, right? It's so many different ways that you're able to leverage your creativity to be better when it comes to your finances, right? And I think one of the things when it comes to being creative, that's really what some of the smartest investors are doing. They're creatively thinking what the world is going to look like in 5 years or 10 years. Is it I'm investing in electronic vehicles now? Or is it, in this new stay-at-home world, am I investing in, digital teleconferencing companies? Or am I, so it's all about understanding what creativity that you have and now applying it to different fractions of your life. And I think for me, one, it's like how to save better, how to be, it could be saving better, how to be more frugal, how to be more creative when it comes to different aspects of what I would typically spend money on, or it could be different creativity when it comes to thinking about the future and how I'm going to be. So, 10 years from now, I'll have a child that's, 9 or 10 years old. And from there, it's like, okay, how am I thinking about things in this way? But I think the creativity definitely comes with personal finance, because everyone creatively thinks about different ways that they either want to make money or save money, or creatively spend their money. But I think that for me, it's all about, creatively thinking about how to grow my money as well.
That's awesome. And the whole time you're talking about that, I'm sitting here laughing, because if my wife is listening, she'll make fun of me. I have so little rhythm that when we clap at church, I'm always off rhythm, and she yells at me because I'm messing other people up. So you definitely got me on that. All right, next question. What's your advice for someone who's starting out in their late 50s? Is there still time to prosper?
Absolutely. I think that it's, once again, understanding your why, understanding what your goals are, right? Everyone's definition of prospering is going to be completely different, right? Are you in your 50s still living paycheck to paycheck, or is it in your 50s and you're saying, I want to retire very soon? And I think that's when it comes down to understanding what your why is and now figuring out how to reach those goals. Because if it's, living paycheck to paycheck, then my response is, for sure, let's figure out, one, how can you make more money, or better, how can you spend less money? Because at the end of the day, it's the same thing, right? You can make $100,000, but actually have, $70,000 in outflows because of expensive car and a expensive house. And therefore you really only netting $30,000, right? Or you could be making, $60,000 and now you're only spending $20,000 in outflows. Now you actually are making $40,000. So you're making more than that person that makes $100K, right? And so it boils down to different budgeting tricks. But then for the person that's thinking about retiring, it might literally be about, what are some different aggressive ways of trying to allow your money to make money, right? Is it about, for a person that's 50, you got a few years before retirement legally, you might be able to be more aggressive when it comes to your 401k or your, self-directed IRA. And you now might be able to be figuring out different ways of allowing your money to grow tax-free that you're now going to be able to now leverage, right? You might be able to do, you might own your home, and you might be starting to think about, I don't have any dependents. So in a few years, I might be able to leverage not only my home as an asset, you might be able to do a reverse mortgage where you still live in your home, but you get money for it. And, you give your home to someone when you pass on, that not being a dependent, because you might not have dependents. But it's so many different things. But to the person that's 50, 100% is not over, right? Like there's so many people, different technology. We're going to live longer than the ancestors that came before us, right? It's just a fact, right? I think the average living age might be like 86 and a half from the last actuary table I looked at. And so you got 37 years to live, and it's so many amazing things that you could be doing in that time in between. And it's all about just figuring out what the why is and how do you actually get there.
Yeah, that's awesome insight, because I have come across that in my career, people who are later and they're like, okay, what's the point of saving? And then it is, it's really important to get after it. So I think we got the last question of the day. How do we learn more from Ross Mack? How can our viewers stay in touch with you and see what you're dropping?
Yeah, awesome. Once again, Brian, I'm so amazed and grateful for the opportunity to be here. Everyone, please follow me at I'm Ross Mack. That's IMROSSMAC. That's on all platforms, being Twitter and Instagram. And also, subscribe on YouTube. My name is Ross Mack, RO $$ there. And also, go download some of my new music. I am on every streaming platform. You'll hear my music in some of the latest television shows or some of the new Netflix series, whether it was the Outer Banks, or like I said, I had a song there, or NBA 2K21, or different Showtime shows. And so, but just, definitely for me, I'm a giver. So one thing that I'm very passionate about is bringing information to everyone to where you're at, right? I'm going to find a way to make it more entertaining, to learn about everything we're talking about, right? I'm going to help you laugh while simultaneously be like, oh my God, that's what he mean by that. I should have been doing this, right? And so for me, it's like, how do I help bridge the information gap for everyone? And that's what I'm all about.
Awesome. And I will attest, I've watched a decent amount of videos, and I really enjoyed them. And now that I know that you have music for the Outer Banks, I'm really hoping there's a second season, because I want to find out if they get that gold back or not. Sorry, spoiler alert if you haven't seen season 1. But for everyone who attended today, really thank you for joining. We'll be back again next week, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. And if you have any questions, want to talk to a financial planner, you can go on your app or online and schedule an appointment. Have a great rest of the week.